Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and I have a great guest. We had so much fun the last time. By the way, I love your hair. I know I told you this last time, but I just think it's phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
So I am so excited to bring you in to have these conversations about communication and speaking and all the adaptations that you really kind of do around it and your background in it as well. So, Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Kat. I am so excited to be here. We had such an amazing conversation. So I've been looking forward to this for really months because I know these things take time. So
Yeah.
it's really great to be here with you. And I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, I am too. So, as we go ahead and dive in, then please tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. So I am a TED Trained speakers coach. My background is a little bit eclectic. I came through many different careers. I started off actually as a fundraiser many years ago, and worked in the not-for-profit world, and then moved into advertising and spent almost 25 years working for some of the largest ad agencies in the world on some of the world's most recognizable brands. And I started off sort of in the trenches, working directly on those brands, doing marketing and advertising, and eventually moved into more senior roles and more strategic roles. And ended my career, God, almost 10 years ago now, as a senior vice president of strategy. I worked as a planner, and my job was to really understand why consumers make the buying decisions they make and to build out the underpinnings of the campaigns that you would see in markets. So I would build the strategy. We would work with our creative and our creative teams who would then develop what you see in market, and that's sort of how it all worked. And of course, advertising is a storytelling medium. But when I think about storytelling, where I really learned true storytelling was when I made the switch into the TED world. I had come to a point in my career in advertising where the idealist in me was feeling very stifled. And, I realized I was an idealist in a capitalist world and I needed to make a change. And I just started doing some volunteer work, and I got hired as a speaker's coach. Didn't know what a speaker's coach was, but I thought, you know what, my whole job is presentations and speaking. And so give me a little bit of training on this TED thing, and I'm sure I've got this. Well, my world changed because what I found was, first of all, I found my people who were idealists like me, people who wanted to change the world, people who wanted to impact the future, and who were doing the work. In fact, were so busy doing the work, they were forgetting to tell anyone about it. And here they would find themselves on a stage at a TED event, and they would have to take their entire life's career, their life's work, and condense it down into a 15-minute TED Talk. And that's where I came in. I found I had a skill I didn't know I had. One, that skill was to take all of that information and just distill it into that core insight that I was so skilled at doing, had spent 25 years doing it in advertising, And now I was doing it for these world-changing individuals. And then it was building a story around it so that the rest of us understood the importance of the work that they do. And so that's how I came to what I'm doing. I started my company, Talk Boutique, coming out of the work I had done on TED for almost 5 years. I've gone on to work with TED speakers globally, work with scientists, academics, technologists, artists, you name it, people who are making change in our world and who are often, again, so busy doing it, they're not telling anyone about it. And that's where I
Mm.
come in. I help them to articulate their message told through story so that the rest of us not only understand it, but it changes our world so we can impact it as well.
Oh, so beautifully said. I love this too because when we think of the world of people speaking, and I think back to, listening to people speak and some of the things that I've attended and stuff like that, those that I have connected with the most have been those that have had the ability to integrate their story into the points that they are sharing. And it's really interesting. I think especially after COVID, how much we're seeing it shift in how people are communicated, whether it's just your social media or like the TEDx stage or conferences, like people are looking for that emotional connection, which I am super excited about because that's my favorite space to be in. And it's really interesting how you can intake information, including statistics and scientific evidence, while you're also integrating these other pieces into something that really could change. And I feel like, and I'd love your opinion on this, I feel like that when we integrate the stories into the information that we are putting out, that like the mind actually intakes a lot more than if you were just giving it the data and the logistics and the steps for the next piece.
Well, and I mean, you're hitting on exactly, the right points because there's brain science behind storytelling. There's a lot of brain science behind storytelling. And this is something, of course, look, as humans, we are hardwired for story. We have been telling stories since we sat in caves around campfires and drew on cave walls. Story has been the basis for human communication since the beginning of humanity and probably even before, quite frankly. But when we look at the brain science behind it, what we see is that our brain has evolved to be able to incorporate stories in a way that builds our memories. So when we tell information in a story, and we use a story effectively, 70 to 80% of the information that we tell in that story is retained by the individual. Now,
Ooh.
imagine any presentation you've given, like and any corporate presentation we've been in. Do you remember much about it?
Oh
Maybe a
no.
slide or two, like maybe if you're lucky, right? But if you could have your audience remember 70 to 80% of what you've just said, isn't that a better way to do it? So why wouldn't you use story? And the reason why our brain remembers it is because our brain is both predictive and associative. So predictive, it's always slightly ahead of us. It's always imagining what's coming next, and it does that because our brain ultimately is trying to keep us alive, right? So it's like, is there a monster around that corner? Is the dinosaur going to eat me? I mean, these are all sort of the evolutionary parts of our brain. So it's predicting its environment. It's looking around all the time and going, based on this environment, am I safe or am I not? So in
Mhm.
storytelling, when we're storytelling, our brain loves it because it's giving it a predictability. It's like, I think this is going to happen. So it engages us. The second thing, the association piece, is how we remember things. We don't have a memory center of the brain. Memories are formed all over the brain and they're held within the various cortices of the brain. And those cortices are associated to our senses: sight, sound, touch, taste. So when we create associations to information that we want people to remember, it's easier to remember when it's in different parts of our brain. So if I'm telling
Mm.
you a story, what I'm doing is I'm literally electrically lighting up multiple parts of your brain. And in fact, what research tells us, it's about 7 parts of our brain when we're using sensory inputs through storytelling. When we
Wow.
tell data and facts, we light up one, maybe two parts of our brain, basically the language processing parts of our brain. So the likelihood of us remembering it is pretty low. But when we tell story, we light up seven parts of the brain. So those are the associations. So if I'm telling you, and I'll give you an example that's so like, I always find this so impactful. So if I were to say to you, wow, he's got rough hands, that's interesting. And maybe you're like, oh, okay, rough hands. But if I say he has rough, leathery hands,
Mm.
do you notice how that felt different in your brain? Like it just like your whole body, you're like, ooh,
You can
leather.
visualize it a lot more.
Yeah. So you get a visual, and then maybe your curiosity is piqued. Oh, leathery. Does he work in the fields? Does he like suddenly you build a story in your brain around that, right? That's the prediction part of your brain at work. And the association, like you said, you saw leather, right? Rough, one very like it's like not enough. Rough hands,
Mm.
like maybe you got a sensory, maybe you got like touch. That was about all you got from that. And it's the same. I'll give you another one that just to kind of, underscore that point. If we say she's got a nice voice, great. But if I were to say she has a silky, velvety voice,
Ooh.
right now, for me, I'm imagining a lounge singer in a smoky cafe, like my brain goes to these places. So this is the power of story. And when we use it in the context of what we want people to remember. So, I mean, those two little examples, they gave you lots of things to think about. But what if I had told you a story, and inside of that story was an idea that I wanted you to remember? Now we're talking about the power of story. Because if I embed that idea in the story and I use all the predictability and associations that story allows me to use as brain science, what's happened is I've created a memory device for you. And if I've been a good storyteller, um, you're going to want to tell somebody else that story. And now my
Mm.
idea goes along with it. And that is the basis of TED Talks.
Oh, this is amazing. I love this. I love it when it comes to the brain as well. Like, I am so
Mhm.
fascinated by the abilities that we have within the brain to create connection and feeling and senses, even when
Mm.
something is not physically in front of us.
Yeah.
And I did not know that you had seven different parts of the brain that are picking up from storytelling. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I think about all the stories that I've heard and the ones that I kept and I shared. That's exactly why. Like, how cool is that? Okay. This is probably one of my favorite pieces simply because I do believe that the senses are very important when you are speaking to people. And I feel like even when you're speaking to your friends or family and you're relaying a story, you tend to use things in it, right? I mean, I think about,
Yeah.
talking about like, oh, I remember this guy, he cut me off from the left and it was like, boom, right? Like you end up using
Yeah.
noises and all these things. And
Yes.
yet you see people that try to dial it back so much in speaking spaces. And I think that some of it is the fear of like, well, but doesn't that come across unprofessional?
Mm, great question. And I do get this. So there's a couple of questions that come along with that. So number one is stories don't belong in business, right? Case
Mm,
studies, not stories. Which is like case studies are problem, solution, outcome, right? Very directed. So let's tell a case study, not a story. Isn't it unprofessional to be animated, to be emotional, to be using your body and your voice? Well, here's the question back on that one. So, what is it you're trying to achieve? Because before you make a judgment on what it is, the methodology that you're employing, because that's really what we're talking about. And story
mhm.
is one of the many different tactics that you have access to as a communicator, that you can choose to use or not. That's up to you. So really you have to ask yourself, what is it you're trying to communicate and what is the outcome you want? And so if what you're trying to communicate is um, a set of research and you want people to understand it, story has a place in that. Because knowing that I can choose to access two parts of my audience's brain, or I can choose to access seven parts of their brain. Now, I may be telling you research that is very dry, but if I now make up a story around it, so let's say I don't know, let's say that we're researching I don't know, the migration habits of turtles. I don't know, I just made that up. And you go, okay, how, and I've done maybe years of research on, where they go and what they do. Well, I can just tell you things like, 78% of turtles choose to um, um, what's the word? Sleep, hibernate three
I was
months of
like,
the
I was
year.
trying to think.
Yeah. 78% of turtles hibernate for 3 months every year. Or I could say to you, in our research, we were we started to notice that a large proportion of the turtles would go missing every January, and we couldn't find them. We would go to their usual places and at their feeding times, and we found that some turtles were there, but there was a large proportion of them that weren't showing up. And at first we thought, well, maybe they are maybe they've gotten killed, or maybe or perhaps they've moved to a different, feeding spot or whatever. But we started to tag them, and in tagging them, we were able to follow various turtles throughout the year and what their habits were. And we found that at one point in the year, there was this phenomenon that would happen where there was a meeting of the turtles. Literally, they would all come together. And we were astounded at this. Like, what is this? Like, this whole group of turtles are getting together. And from that meeting, it almost seemed as if there was a hierarchy involved, and some would move in a different way and they would go away, and they didn't come back. And so we started to follow them. And what we found was that it was as if this group of turtles had decided who would maintain a social structure and a protection structure, and which ones would go into a hibernation. And so it was astounding because 78% of them would go into hibernation and 12% almost stood guard. Now, what a difference, right? As you hear that story versus
Yeah.
78% of turtles hibernate, right? So what did I do? Well, I told you a story. Now, and it's data. It is data. Of course it is. But I've made it meaningful to you. I've given you curiosity, the curiosity of the researchers. I've given you a sense of place. The turtles got together in a feeding ground. I'm sure you're pit. Now, I could have even gone deeper. I could have said, they go to this incredible grotto where it's green and, there's waterfalls and very humid, and they seem to like hang out for a couple of days, lazing on the rocks. But in that time, it was almost as if a decision was made. So now you're there, you're seeing, the waterfalls. So there are ways in which we can play with the sensory data so that the brain is more and more and more engaged.
Mm,
So when somebody says to me, look, it's just not professional to use inflection, to use your body to bring stories in, it comes back to, well, do you want people to remember and be engaged by the information you're giving? And if you do, then what you need to find, because every person is different, and the worst thing you can do is to show up and tell that kind of a story and be awkward and uncomfortable because you don't believe in it, right?
yeah.
So it has to be authentic to you. So your approach to storytelling, you need to understand how to tell stories, and that's important so that you can build it, but you're building it with what you're comfortable with. And it should not be the first time you're telling that story out loud when you're in front of an audience. So
Mm,
practice it so that you find what's right for you. You know, some people are going to be wildly, gesticulating and getting excited and having lots of inflection in their voice. And other people may be a little bit more reserved, but still having that same engagement, still having some form of a connection to the information, using their voice and their inflection, because these are the engagement tools that our body gives us in order to bring our audience in. So if you want your audience to retain what you're saying, use the tools, but find the way to use those tools so it's authentic to you.
Oh, I love this. And I love telling stories. And something that popped up while you were talking about this as well is when I think of a lot of the speaker coaches and people that I have spoken with that talk about how like you need to share stories, I think that some people have a very different definition of what a story is. And that might be the reason for anybody that's listening why you aren't making the connection of like, well, I don't understand how to tie a story
Yes.
into something like that. When if you think about it, you're taking people on the journey of part of your discovery to then tie the pieces together so that what you are giving them sticks in a way that makes sense in the human brain. And so it was just something that came out while I was thinking. I was like, oh, stories, because I know that I kind of thought that at first as well, was like I had this definition of a story, and a story is like once upon a time, right? But when you really think about it, and I love the way that you elaborated and created this visual and went on this journey to bring the data, because you can think about it that way as well. It's a journey. You're including people in the journey in certain points so that they feel like they understand what you are doing. They can see how you are doing it. They become more involved in
Mhm.
it because they can put themselves almost in the shoes of what is going on, which, like you said, then kind of really absorbs that information. I mean, I think about some of my favorite TV shows, which one of them is about archaeology. And I love it because you get to follow along. There's story
Mhm.
behind it, it's discovery. And in between that, I'm learning all kinds of historical tips. Now, if you told me, oh, do you like archaeology? You want to sit down and take a class? I'd be like, hell no. But the way that this show is presented and the storytelling that's in it and the way you kind of follow the journey, you feel like you are traveling with them, or you feel like you're like, oh my gosh, that would have been so scary. Like, it's so
Right.
interesting to think
Well,
about this.
and what you're really saying, and I think this is what is so powerful about learning to become a storyteller. When you're a good storyteller, and this is what this archaeology show, and I'm like you, I love watching archaeology. It's we're a voyeur, like it's voyeuristic, right? We're watching, like we're like, over their shoulder, like, oh, I get to be here. I don't have to be in the 120-degree weather,
Right?
sweating and dirty, but I get to be here with them. So we're this voyeur on a journey with them. And so as a storyteller, that's what we want to invite our audience into. We want to bring them. So, so many people, when they think about story, like you said, once upon a time this thing happened. The problem with that is that stories, because we live our lives linearly, right? Like we, today, tomorrow, the next day, yesterday, when I was a child, when I get older, we have these linear lives, and we think that storytelling is linear, and it's not.
Mm,
In fact, the most interesting stories are never linear. They take us all over the place. We know this. Like if you're reading a book or watching a movie, do you want to start at the beginning and then watch every moment that led up to something? No,
very
we
true.
don't. Right? What we want is for you to take us to a point, bring us into this in a place that is interesting, um, and then reveal, right? So first, when we're telling stories, we have to give ourselves permission to get out of the linearity, to get out of the other day this thing happened, right? Because that's the way that most people tell stories. This thing happened to me. Let me tell you about it. Well, first of all, that's not very interesting. Secondly, you've just given away the plot point, right? You already told us what's going to happen. Why do I need to listen? Right? So what we're doing, and you're also looking at it through the lens of fact, right? This, then this, then this, then this. And so what we need to do is pull ourselves out of that, go into the first person. I was walking down the road. It was a beautiful day. The birds were chirping, the sun was shining. It was early spring. You could smell the grass beginning to grow, and the mud, just still that wet, squishy mud as you're walking along. And so you're with me, right? You can smell that. You can see it. You can hear the birds. You can feel the sun on your face. That's what we want. We want to bring the person into that story. Now, what is who's with me? So when we're telling stories, we start environmentally, because environments bring people in, and it also gives us the opportunity to stimulate that brain,
Mm.
right? So we're using all of these techniques. Now, what we're literally using brain science. And so when you're a smart storyteller, you know this. You want to bring your audience in. You want to invite them into a moment in time with you. And now they're walking alongside of you. They're the voyeur with you. Now, and that's what movies do, right? They're not using words, they're using visuals to do that for us. They
Mm-hmm.
drop us into a scene. And so, then it's like, who's with you? Who's your characters, right? Who's the story about? And we tell a little bit, I'm with my friend, my friend Angela. I've known her since I was a child. We often go walking together. Okay, now there's me, and there's, maybe a little bit about me, and you got to know a little bit about Angela. Now, what's happening? What's the, the reason you're telling this story? What's the what we call the issue, the conflict, or the opportunity? Because stories are usually about one of those three things. Is there an
Mm-hmm.
issue? Was there a conflict? Or is there an opportunity? So that's kind of the main point. And that's the point that most people jump into. So what we're doing is we're backing up a little bit and we're going, start with an environment, invite your audience in, let them see what you're seeing. And as a storyteller, this is powerful because it forces you to drop yourself into that moment, right? So now you're living it and you're explaining it as you're living it. So it becomes easier. Now, once you've gotten to the point of, okay, here's my environment, here's who's with me. Now, what's the thing I want to tell you about? What you want to do as a storyteller. And this is what your archaeology show does. This is what every good show does, which every good storyteller does, is they know that to keep the audience engaged and to get them to really deeply care about what's happening is you've got to do something called raising the stakes. You've got to create a tension point in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I can tell you, the other day this thing happened. So there, what's the issue, the conflict, or the opportunity? What is that? But we got to raise the stakes on it. We got to make it even more important, right? So this thing may have happened, but then, and it's always the and then moment. That and then moment, what it does is it allows us to kind of sit forward, to engage, to want to hear more, because the issue, conflict, or opportunity was interesting. We get it. Now this thing has happened and you need to find a solution, or you need to create an opening, or whatever it is. But when this next thing happens, now I'm like, what are you going to do? Now I'm really engaged, right? Now, this is a really simple storytelling structure. It's really 5 parts that I've given you: environment, characters, issue, conflict, or opportunity, raising of the stakes. Now, you could go from that point to an ending, the outcome, what happens, wrap it all up. And that's a very, very simple storytelling structure. And when we're telling stories that are, in a more business environment, more professional environment, it's a great one because it allows you to get to the point pretty quickly, but it allows you to also engage the audience. But what I found is that the other thing, and this is sort of a long answer to your short question, which is like, how do you get them into that story?
Yeah.
Well, and how do you actually put your information into that story so they remember something? Well, the raising of the stakes, that tension point, is such an important thing because so two things. One, before you tell your story, know what your idea is. What's the point you're putting inside of it? If we think of movies or shows or anything that we watch in popular media where there's a learning aspect to it, that learning aspect was probably determined long before they wrote the show, right? And that's what we need to do as presenters and speakers, or anyone that's trying to use story to convey information. What is it you want the story to convey? And that, I call that an idea. So that needs to be crafted long before you figure out what story you're going to use, or even the telling of that story, because that
Mm.
story becomes a metaphor for that idea, for that information, right? So you get all the way to that raising of the stakes. And in that moment of tension with that audience who's now going, well, what happened? And why are you telling me this? Because sometimes it's that, right? That's where you go, I tell you this because, and now you get to put in your idea. And your
Mm.
idea then becomes, it's a big aha moment. Oh my goodness, I didn't even see that coming. I see what you did there. You took this story that was maybe completely out of context to what we're talking about, and you contextualized it with this idea. So now I have this interesting story that I'm very engaged in that holds an idea. And now I understand that idea better because you contextualized it with that story.
Oh, I love this. And I love the structure in it too, because while it is still structured, right, there's an outline, I feel like there's still a lot of play in that. And I think that that
Mm.
is, especially for me, right? That's what a lot of people are looking for, because people get so stuck in, well, this is the way that they told me I should write it, and then I have to make sure I memorize it the way that it is written, and there's no play or flow in that. And I think that this is very beautiful because you get to recall a memory to include it into it, which, like you said, it's very easy to recall. It's very easy to spit out when you're telling people, because you're not having to think about it because you've already lived it, which makes it so much easier. And that's my favorite way to bring people in and talk about the things that I have been through, and all of that is bringing people in. And then it is just like you're talking to a friend and telling a story, right? With maybe a little bit of emphasis, because you do
Yeah.
want to get that point across. So now my question is, because I know that we have intrigued so many people that are listening, and so many people are like, oh my God, I've been wanting to speak and I haven't done it. And this makes so much sense. How in the hell do I even get started?
Yeah. So I mean, well, there's a couple of answers in that. So first of all, if you want to speak on, do you want to speak on professional stages? Do you want to speak in front of, your business colleagues? Where do you want to speak? Like, what is
Mm,
it? What is the purpose for speaking for you? And I think that is something that, for so many people, using your voice is important. And I advocate this all the time, because here's what I truly, truly, deeply believe, and it is what my message often is, which is we need more diversity of thought leadership in our world. Why? Because thought leaders are those who create our future. And when we look out to the world, our thought leaders, we tend to elevate them to these positions of power. They are leaders of countries, or leaders of companies, or leaders of industry, and when we look at all of these, very powerful positions, I don't know about you, but I look around and I don't see myself reflected in those places.
hmm
And so and if we can agree, and I think we can, that they are creating our future, right? They're building the policies and the laws and the approaches that actually create the future. Well, if my voice is not represented there, then how will I be represented in that future that's being created? And so one of the things that I talk a lot about is the fact that we have to stop thinking of thought leaders as being outside of ourselves, and we have to start seeing ourselves as thought leaders. And we
mm,
might be a thought leader in our family, or a thought leader in our neighborhood, or a thought leader in our company, or a thought leader, in our little group or community that we're in. It doesn't matter where, but when you use your voice, you're using your voice as a thought leader. And so when you start to think about yourself as that, then the words that you say, the stories you tell, the messages you share become part of a bigger context of messages that are impacting our future. And so I strongly advocate for people to use your voice, get out there and speak. So, how do you start? Well, number one, what are you speaking about? What do you believe? What are you passionate about? What do you know that no one else knows? We all have things that we know that no one else knows, because we're all unique. Each one of us comes with a different set of education, cultural background, impacts from our families. Maybe it could be that we have a different gender orientation, or perhaps we come from, our, our culture or whatever. So we all come with a very unique set of circumstances that have created who we are. And because of that, we see the world different than anyone else. And maybe you're a highly trained expert. Perhaps you're a researcher. Maybe you're a scientist or an academic. Or maybe you're an entrepreneur who's been hard scrabbled and has done your own thing all the way through. But you see something that you're passionate about, And that's why you want to speak. You don't want to just speak because you want to use your voice. At least most of us. I mean, there are people out there, but I think the ones that we're talking to here, um,
Yeah.
there's something that they want to say. So, number one, what is it you're passionate about? What makes you the right person to talk about that? Okay. So what is your area of expertise and why is that expertise? How did you get it? What makes you unique? And then what is the unique point of view you have within that? And then the next question is, what is the impact of what you know if everybody else knew it? What would be different in
Mm,
the world? And so those three things, and that's really, it's the Simon Sinek, what, how, why. And the why is important, of course, but in the context of building your thought leadership, your core idea, the what and the how are really important because that's what makes you unique. The what is ubiquitous. Many people could speak on the what. It's a topic, right? So for me, I speak about the need for diversity of thought leadership. That's my what. Lots of people speak about similar things. I may not term it in that exact way, but it's a
hmm
pretty ubiquitous topic. My difference is that, for me, because of my background as a neurodiverse aging female leader, I see the world through the lens of seeing that we need that diversity because of the way in which it's impacting our future. And I know this because I know that so many diverse leaders don't know how to or choose not to use their voice. And so for me, that piece of it, and as a communications expert, that's where I really can help. So putting that together is what my what and how are. But the why, of course, is because we need to co-create a future that is more resilient and more inclusive than we have today. And so that's my why, that's the outcome. So that's where I come from. But my what and how are what drive me.
mm,
And so as you're getting started, ask yourself those three questions. What is it that I know that is, out there in the world that needs to be talked about? And then how do I approach that topic in a way that no one else does? And then if that what and that how were true, what would the world look like? Or what would the impact or my industry or the outcome be that would be so different than where we are today? Define that. Once you have that, then start practicing it. So don't step out onto a public stage immediately because that's risky. You're not ready for that. Practice it. Start off, write it down, have somebody else say it to you so you can hear it. Now, when you hear it, your brain is going to do something that's going to be crazy. You're going to go, that's not what I want to talk about at all. Why? Because once it's outside of your brain, you're hearing it without all the knowledge that's in that big brain of yours. And
mm,
so you're going to need to refine it. Keep writing it until you get it down to what it is that you want to talk about. So when somebody says it to you, go, yes, that's it. Okay, now you know you have it. Now the next step would be, okay, where can you start practicing saying that out loud, telling stories? Maybe you go on podcasts. Maybe you start your own podcast. Maybe you do a YouTube channel. Maybe you do Instagram lives. Maybe you're on TikTok. Look, use your voice. The more you can say things out loud, the more your knowledge is going to deepen in yourself because you're going to get input, you're going to get lots back. And then as you build that, then start thinking about, okay, maybe I do want to be on a stage now. You might be ready. So it is a process.
yeah. Oh, amazing. Andre, I can't thank you enough for just feeding the audience all of this information. And I understand that, all of us have a story or a journey that they want to take people on that they know is important, but they just don't know how to share. And I love earlier that, you stated that it can be in your community, it can be at your workplace, it could be with your family. Like a thought leader doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are this huge inspiration like Tony Robbins or Mel Robbins or anyone like that. Like you can do it on whatever scale that you are comfortable with or you feel called to. And I think that that's something that for anyone that's listening, remember and think about because we tend to get stuck in other people's ideas of like, yeah, but that's what they're doing. So like, that's where I should push it. And that might not necessarily align with you. Maybe just making a difference in your family lineage is huge for you, or in your community that you've been in for so long is so huge to you. And that is enough of an impact to be able to then ripple out across that area. And like you said, when you're using storytelling in a way where people connect, then they're going to share that story and impact, which is then going to spread your message even further. So I think that this is. It's just a beautiful reminder of the natural abilities that we all have and understanding that it works in a way that you want it to when you pay attention to that and not get stuck in all of the glam and things that are outside of us. So I can't thank you enough for this. I think that this, again, it's just so important for people to hear. And it is really that simple. I love how you break it down. There's not 10,000 things that are in it, right? That you don't have to overcomplicate it. And so I want to give you the chance then as we are coming to a close that, you've given some amazing information and tips, but is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah. So I want to just pick up on what you were just saying, which is, yes, you know, come from where you are. Don't worry about having to be somebody else or to make the big impact or to suddenly become have a 10 million people following you on whatever platform you're on. It is about doing the best you can from where you are. And that's really important, like from where you are. So if you can, say that message and impact one person, remember, like we all know this, it's the ripple effect of our world. We're in a world of, I don't know, what is it, 8 billion people now. I don't even know what the numbers are. Maybe it's trillion. I have no idea. But the reality is, as humans, we love stories. And because we love stories, we love to get new ones. And every person on this planet has a story. It's called your life. And those lives are long and they're linear, but we get to go into those lives and find moments where we have been inspired or impacted, and we can do the same for others. And so when we share that, that is the gift that we are giving to the world. And it is a gift, and it's a gift of knowledge and understanding, and it's a gift of connection. And those things are so important in our world today with the craziness that we are living through in these moments. And so, when you have the opportunity to connect, make the choice to do it.
Mm.
And if you want to learn how to use these tools, I'm happy to offer. We have what we call a storytelling toolkit, which includes the frameworks that I've taken you through today. So these are frameworks we use with every one of our clients. They come out of the work that I did on TED, and they're powerful. And so it's an easy, again, there's just sort of workbooks that you can use. And as you're trying to figure out your story, you can use it as there are prompts for you to help you get there. So
Oh, I
happy to
love
offer
that.
that.
Yes, definitely. Well, and please do us a favor then and tell everybody where can they find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world?
Yeah, so follow me, check me out on YouTube. I have a channel there called Talk Boutique. I think it's talk.boutique, where I do weekly videos. I'm constantly giving much of what you hear today. I'm going deeper into it, telling stories, and we do much on storytelling, but also on personal branding and thought leadership and that sort of thing. So check me out there. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. You can always find me at Andrea Sampson on LinkedIn. And check out our website, talkboutique.com. And we always have things happening. So make sure you follow me in those places, and, feel free to reach out at talkboutique.com, and we'll be happy to answer questions for you.
Well, thank you so much, Andre. It was so wonderful having you on the podcast today. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and insight and tips for everyone.
Oh, well, thank you, Kat. This has been such a pleasure. I have enjoyed it so much. You have great questions and great energy, and I love the connection that we've had today.
Oh, thank you so much. And to everybody else out there, don't forget to go and follow Andrea. We'll have all that information in the show notes. We'll make it super simple for you to be able to click and follow her. Excuse me. And please, like, take this to heart and think about this, especially when Andrea was saying, you can be a thought leader in your space, in your family, in your community, that if you have this burning passion to want to share, you can. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, unless you want it to be on every stage all over the globe. Maybe that's something that ends up coming up down the road that you weren't even thinking about at this moment in time. But as she said, get out there and share your voice, share your message, share your story. This is how we communicate. This is how we diversify. And this is how we inspire and ripple across to share others with ideas that we are thinking. And this is how we make a difference. So please go and listen to this again. Make sure you take lots of notes. And until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable